Good evening, guys. My name is Giuseppe Galifi. I'm a registered physiotherapist. I'm a certified sport therapist, as well as a pro trainer with Canford Pro. I'm also a proud part owner of Studio 2 Wellness, presentation we're going to kind of do from Studio 2 today. This is actually a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. Our other owner, as I say, I'm a part owner, is Carlo. He suffered from a really bad concussion, and I've been treating him basically ever since I've known him. So this topic I'm hoping is going to be beneficial for all you guys. We are going to be talking a little bit about traumatic brain injuries, but we're going to focus on mild traumatic brain injuries, which actually is otherwise known as concussions. Okay, so that's going to kind of be the focus of the presentation. You're going to have plenty of time to ask questions. We're going to try to make this interactive as well. So I will have a point where we're going to do a little bit of meditation. We have some personal experiences as well that we're going to try to tie in. But feel free to ask questions at any time. Okay? All right. So the key that I'm going to focus on here is the benefits of physiotherapy and yoga in the recovery from traumatic brain injuries. Okay? So just before I get started, I want to talk a little bit about the studio. I promise this will be quick. We are a multidisciplinary studio located in downtown Georgetown. We're actually on top of the old bank. If you know where the cellar is, we're just above that. We're currently offering physiotherapy, massage, Reiki services, as well as yoga and fitness classes. What I really like about our environment, I think why we enjoy offering yoga so much, is we have a really unique space. It's a very intimate space that we kind of work out of, which I think is very beneficial. We also do things like shockwave, laser, and acupuncture, and we don't charge anything additional for it. It's the same price for all those services. Okay? So, enough about Studio 2, let's get into the topic. So the first thing I want to talk about is just generally traumatic brain injuries. Okay? So there are three that I'm going to focus on: mild TBIs, moderate TBIs, and severe TBIs, but the main focus of this presentation is going to be mild TBIs, basically concussions. Okay? So you guys may already be aware, the way we kind of determine the severity of an actual concussion is the Glasgow Coma Scale. Okay? So usually we're rating a patient's response after trauma not by the damage to the brain, but by their actual deficits. The Glasgow Coma Scale has three parts to it. Okay, it's a 15-point scale. It basically evaluates auditory stimuli, or response to auditory stimuli, response to pain stimuli, okay, and response to verbal stimuli. With those three responses, you get a score out of 15. The higher your score, the better. Okay, the better your results overall. The lower score, the more traumatic the brain injury. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this mild TBI, otherwise known as a concussion. For a mild TBI, the Glasgow Coma Scale is about 13 or higher. Okay, 13 or higher. So you can tell you're doing quite well. Okay. Now, usually, even with a mild TBI, there could be a loss of consciousness. There could be memory or mental status changes, and it is possible with a concussion, even a mild TBI, to have damage, resultant problems, even long-term disability. The biggest thing we're worried about, it happens in about 10% of the population, is post-concussion syndrome. Okay? So the majority of the time, we say about 80 to 90% of concussion, people who suffer concussions, they get better in about 2 weeks. There is about 10 to 20% that it lasts longer, unfortunately. And those people tend to suffer from post-concussion syndrome symptoms. Okay? Now, I'll just briefly talk about the other two. Now, moderate TBIs, notice what's happening is the Glasgow Coma Scale is going down. Now it's 9 to 12, lower. Okay? It means there's more deficits there. Now this person can have an extended period of unconsciousness. They may have an operable brain lesion. There may be abnormal CT findings or temporary or permanent impairments. Okay? And then if we look at a severe TBI, now it even goes lower. Now we're all the way down to 3 to 8 in terms of the response to verbal, auditory, and pain stimuli. It goes even lower. Okay, now these people have extended periods of unconsciousness. There could be obvious brain lesions or abnormalities. They could be non-responsive, and a lot of times their outcomes are uncertain. One thing we do know is, regardless of the severity you have, age is a bit of a factor. Okay? We noticed if we had the exact same traumatic brain injury to 3 different individuals, 3 different ages, the person who's youngest would fare the best. And the reason for that is the brain is still very plastic when we're young. It's called neuroplasticity. Once we hit the age of about 10, 11, it starts to lateralize, it specializes, so you become left-handed or right-handed. You recognize a hand dominance. But before that, the brain is actually very, very plastic, and it has the ability to adapt to damage. That's why some children who suffer even a moderate TBI recover fully. No sign of it at all, because the brain is plastic at that point. Just a quick mention, what do you guys think? What do you think does the most damage? The initial injury or the secondary injury in a traumatic brain injury? Is it the initial impact, the initial injury, or is it the stuff that happens later on? What do you think?
Stuff that happens later on.
It is the stuff that happens later on. So I'll give you an example. There's two types of injuries that you'll get initially. You get a coup and a contra coup. So say, for example, you don't even have to hit your head on something. It could just be the whiplash movement that could cause this. But the brain will ricochet off the front of the skull, and then you'll get a rebound injury where the brain ricochets off the back of the skull. It's surrounded by a water, cerebrospinal fluid. Okay? Now you got two initial injuries. It's not that initial injury that does the most damage. It's the bleeding and the swelling afterwards that does the most damage. Okay, so it's actually the second part of the injury. All right, now I mentioned this already, and I think it's really important to keep in mind and disregard, I'm saying sports related. It doesn't matter what type of concussion you're talking about. The majority of concussions, within a couple of weeks, they resolve. Okay, we're looking at 7 to 10 days, 80 to 90% better. There's no problems after that. But there is the 10 to 20% that are still having symptoms after that fact. Okay, 10 to 20% still have symptoms after those 2 weeks. And this is what I'm going to be focusing on today, is treating post-concussion syndrome. Now I think with people like Crosby, with a lot of athletes out there, there's a lot more awareness of concussions. People are more knowledgeable, but there's still a lot of learning to do. I just did a certification on concussion course, and it was being offered for free by Laval University. Why? Because they just want to increase awareness. They want the professionals to gain the certification so they can help other people and prevent post-concussion syndrome. Now, most of these you guys already know. If you're suffering from any kind of traumatic brain injury, especially concussion or post-concussion syndrome, you know these off by heart. What are you experiencing? You're experiencing things like headaches, dizziness. Fatigue is a major issue. Fatigue, okay? Irritability. You find that your fuse is a little shorter. You get angry a little quicker. Totally normal. Okay, very, very common. Anxiety, insomnia is a big one. Loss of concentration and memory. Most of the times, if I ask you to do a task that requires multitasking, it's not going to happen. A lot of difficulty doing more than one thing at the same time, right? Ringing in the ears, blurry vision, all because the cranial nerves are having pressure on them. Those are very common symptoms, okay? Noise and light sensitivity. My patient right now, I have an MS patient who comes in regularly because the brain is swollen. She just suffered a concussion. She literally smacked her head on the edge of a cabinet. It was a very mild bump, but because with multiple sclerosis there's already brain lesions, she developed a concussion right away. And the first thing she came in, I knew something was wrong. She was wearing glasses as soon as she came in. Severe light and sound sensitivity, very, very common. This is other things that can occur, but they're a lot more rare. A decrease in taste and smell. Now, you guys are probably wondering, because I mentioned physiotherapy and yoga. Both can be very, very beneficial. And I know you guys are thinking, well, when I have that headache, I can't think straight. How is physiotherapy going to help me? Well, I want you to think about this. Initially, when you suffered that actual concussion, even if it was a whiplash and there was no head trauma, the muscles of the back of your neck, these are called the suboccipitals here, the cervical erectors, the upper tracts, the levator scap, all the muscles around your neck probably went into spasm. And guess what? Those actually contributed to some of your symptoms, believe it or not, and your reduced mobility in your neck. So one of the first things that a physiotherapist will focus on is that tension in those muscles, trying to relieve them, trying to get your mobility back, okay? And that won't relieve all your symptoms, but it will help with a good chunk of them. They're called musculoskeletal symptoms, and they're basically because of muscle tension, okay, shortening of those muscles because they've been strained, okay? Muscle spasm, that naturally happens, they're there to protect you. That's why they tighten up, okay? Autonomic changes. You probably noticed, if you suffered a concussion, when you went to go do activities, you fatigued really quickly, or you started to get symptoms. And it wasn't just a daily activity, you were just doing stuff you normally do, but you got tired and you started to get some headache symptoms. That's because of the autonomic changes. Remember, with concussions, there's vascular changes. Remember the swelling and bruising? What would happen if I increase my physical activity a little bit? Well, I increase blood flow to the brain. And if it's not ready for it, you're going to start to get those symptoms again. And it's just swelling, kind of reoccurring. Okay? Vestibular symptoms. You didn't like hearing loud noises. It bothered you. It bothered you to hear loud noises. You also felt unsteady, almost like you were dizzy. You might have even got nausea and vomiting. Very, very common. Visual disturbances and challenges. And planning and pacing your ADLs. Remember I mentioned the fatigue before? You probably had to take a step back and say, okay, what are my priorities today? I can't do everything I was doing before. How am I going to plan, prioritize, and manage my time so I can actually do everything I'm able to do? Okay? So a lot of changes. Now, what I'm going to tell you, the key after concussion is progressive stimulation. You guys are thinking, what do you mean by progressive stimulation? It means that you're actually going to push the visual system. You're actually going to push the auditory system. You're actually going to push the autonomic nervous system as well, regularly, to the point just before you get symptoms, and then you're going to back off. So I do this with all my athletes, I do this with all my concussion symptoms. The first thing I get them on is the treadmill. So what do you think I'm stimulating when I get that blood pressure up? It's that first one there, the autonomic change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get them on the treadmill, and we're just walking, but I'm going to slowly increase that to just before they get their symptoms. The next day I'll do the same thing, and I'll go a little bit harder. But we always respect the symptoms. We're never going to go beyond them. Same thing with vision. You might have heard of, I'll give you an example of an exercise I do with my patients, something called pencil vergence exercises. So I sit there, I grab my finger, I look at the finger until it doubles, and then I push it back out. Bring it in until it doubles, and then I push it back out. You're looking, how's that gonna influence my headache? It will. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna repeat it, either increase the duration or the speed until you get symptoms. What about this vestibular system? You can work on balance exercises. You could combine the vestibular system with the visual system. This one's a tough one. Put your finger in front of you. And what I want you to do, first I want you just to move the finger from side to side. Now, would you say that's visual or vestibular, inner ear? What would you say this is? More visual. Now, what would happen if you did this? Move the finger, keep looking at that finger, but you're now also going to move the head in the opposite direction. You know what you've just done? You've converted a visual exercise into a visual and vestibular exercise. And guess what? The inner ear and the eyes, they work together to allow us to be balanced. Okay? And like I said, prioritize, plan, pace. Your daily activities, I call those the 3 Ps. I teach my students them all the time. Okay? During the day, I teach at a college called Trials College. I teach physiotherapy assistant students. Those are the things I teach them with my MS patients, with my fibromyalgia patients. Prioritize, plan, pace. You're not going to be able to do everything right now. You may not be able to do everything you did before at the same pace. You're going to have to take your day, break it down, and think about what's important to you. What can you get done right now? Okay? All right, the role of yoga. This is really, really important too. And actually, Ono really helped me out. Cecilia really helped me out with this one to kind of come up with some ideas on how yoga is actually extremely beneficial as well. Now, and this was actually enlightening for me too, and kind of a blessing in disguise, okay, because I work as a physiotherapist, but I'm a part owner of a yoga studio. So I got to experience the benefits of both. Okay, patients like Ono telling me the benefits of both. So, with the increased introspective awareness achieved by yoga, there's a lot of benefits. Remember, a lot of yoga is just being aware of self, or being aware of the internal self. Okay? Yes, there's flexibility, there's relaxation, but you become more self-aware. Okay? And remember, with all the stress and anxiety of everyday life, sometimes we're not very self-aware. Okay? And yoga really helps with that. A lot of what it's doing is helping to control stimulation. Remember, I talked about that's all we want to do with a concussion. We want to control how much visual stimuli. We want to control how much auditory stimuli, how much physical. Why do we take kids after a concussion and we say, or even you look at the athletes, where do they go? They go to the quiet room. And they're in the quiet room for a couple of days. Why? Because you have to give the brain a break from visual, auditory, and also physical stimuli. You have to give it a break. It needs to recover. And then you slowly introduce that stimulus over time. Well, yoga is fantastic because it's a very gradual introduction of some of those stimuli. It basically improves your self-awareness. So thinking about breath, thinking about heartbeat, being aware of those things, right? Stress reduction is huge. Increased blood flow to the brain. I thought this was very interesting. Things like the downward dog, they actually increase blood flow to the brain. So some of the movements actually encourage blood flow to the brain. Okay? Reduction in tension. I mentioned this before. Some of the muscles that can contribute to those headaches. You get a lot of relaxation of those muscles from some of the movements and stretches that they're doing. And there's tons more. Okay? So what I'm trying to show you is that yoga and physio combined can give a lot of symptom relief for a lot of these patients. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to bring up Cecilia, and I'd like you guys to actually participate. Cecilia is one of our fantastic instructors at Studio 2 Wellness, and I'd like her to take us through kind of a meditation, a little bit of meditation. It's low risk, you're going to stay seated, but I'd like you to give it a try, okay? Go ahead, Cecilia.
So again, my name is Cecilia White. I'm a yoga instructor. I've been teaching for over 5 years. I've been practicing for over 20. I'm an experienced 750-hour ERYT. So that just means I've taught a lot of people. I've taught a lot of hours, and I train. We train a lot to make sure that we're keeping everyone safe. So what we're going to practice now is a breath work. It's called 4x4 breath, and we use it in the military. So this is the breath that the military uses to train their snipers, so that it brings the heart rate down, it brings attention, focus, and awareness, and it also helps relax, reduce anxiety. Okay, so I'll ask you to close your eyes. If you're uncomfortable closing your eyes, just look down towards the tip of your nose. Okay, we're in a safe place. The door is not locked, but we've got Giuseppe there. Okay, so start to relax. Start to deepen the breath. Okay, so as you inhale completely, the rib cage will start to expand, but the belly will start to push out, and as you exhale completely, the belly will retract. Okay, so we're just starting to deepen that breath. Deepening that breath. And what we want to do here is decrease the breaths per minute. When we decrease the breaths per minute, the brain starts to think the body is falling asleep. So the muscles relax, the mood relaxes, the tension subsides. Okay, so I'll add my instruction here while you're lengthening your breath here. So before we begin, I'll explain. We're going to inhale for 4 beats, hold the breath for 4 beats, exhale for 4 beats, and hold the breath out for 4 beats. Okay, let's let all the breath out together. Inhale, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 3, 2, 1, hold out, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 3, 2, 1, hold, 3, 2, 1. Continue this 4x4 breath, pacing it out for yourself. Right? We have different lung capacities. So you're inhaling, holding, exhaling, holding. Okay, so continue this breath. And we continue for another 30 seconds. I'm watching the clock. And just allow the mind to relax because you're focusing on counting. Okay? Bringing awareness to your count. So as we decrease the breaths per minute, the brain gets the signals that you're starting to relax, that you're calm, that you're safe. Your attention, your awareness is on the breath, so you're here, you're present. And you can use this breath anytime you need to bring the heart rate down, anytime you need to bring anxiety down. If you're driving, obviously you can keep the eyes open. If you're waiting in the checkout line when someone's price checking, use the 4-part breath. 10 more seconds. back to its normal pace. And it's already slower, it's already deeper than when we first begin. So we're in a relaxed state of mind. So our next exercise, our next practice involves a mantra, right? So we use mantra and sound in this practice. It helps with vibration, which will stimulate pineal gland, stimulate the hippocampus, different parts of the brain. So the mantra is peace begins with me. Peace begins with me. So before we start, there is a hand mudra. Okay, so the hands can rest palms up on the lap. And as we say peace, the thumb and the forefinger join. And then as we say begins, ring finger and thumb. With the ring finger and thumb, sorry, the middle finger and thumb was before. And then pinky and thumb, me. Okay, so peace begins with me. So we're just touching each finger as we recite the mantra. Okay? Peace begins with me. Peace begins with me. Peace begins with me. Peace begins with me. 30 seconds. Peace begins with me. 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 Last one. Peace begins with. Relax the hands. Relax the breath. You can drop the chin down to the chest, blinking the eyes open and looking forward. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Cecilia.
So that is an example of how we bring the heart rate down, how we start to use meditation, use breath work to stimulate or relax different parts of the brain using the breath work. Okay, so it's not a spiritual practice, it can be, but it's control. It's about controlling the nervous system. It's about using the breath to help stimulate different parts of the brain, whether to relax or to invigorate. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Cecilia. Next, what I'd like to do is introduce Ono Chantrell. He's actually one of our Student 2 Wellness members. He's done both physiotherapy and yoga at Student 2 Wellness, and he's suffering from concussions. So I'd love for him to share his story. I'll let him take it away. Thanks so much.
Hi. My name is Ono Chantrell. I've got a cheat sheet with me just in case I need it. I was going to my office downtown Toronto on May the 9th, and I was using my usual mode of transportation, which in my case was a longboard, a very long skateboard. That was my 5 minutes of bliss in my day. And I had to get around a car that was very close to the curb, and I did something I normally don't do. Normally I would just swerve around it at full speed, no problems. This time I decided to be more careful and to go in between the nose of the car and the curb, going very slowly, slower than walking even, because I thought that that was safer. And as I did, my rear wheel touched the curb, and I didn't even know that it touched the curb. I didn't know that I fell. All I know that there was no sound anymore, and I became conscious of being just above the ground, falling, hitting with my forehead, my mouth, and then the back of my head. I wanted to go to sleep. I remember wanting to go to sleep. I realized I'm on Bay Street. You can't go to sleep on Bay Street. So I'm looking back. I see my longboard. I stand up. And at that point of time, I became aware of shouting, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And just ignoring, I would just get my longboard. That was important to me. And picked it up, just walked for a little while. I felt a little bit blurred and a little bit dazed. And you know, I'm a pretty tough guy. I do karate and all kinds of stuff like that. I've had bumps and falls before, so I didn't think much of it. I realized that I was bleeding a little bit. And when I finally got to to Queen Street. I even tried to hop on my board again, and as I hopped on my board, I realized, oh, you know what? There's something not right there. I don't have the same balance. Came to the office, and the first thing that my project manager said was, you know, you need to go to Emerge. When I think of Emerge, all I can think of, I've got to wait for 4 hours. It's the last thing I want to do. So I didn't go to Emerge, and instead I actually worked a full day. And how I did that, I do not know. I just tried to take it easy. I came home that night and told my wife. Didn't think much of it. Woke up in the morning, had an absolutely purple eye. Never saw that before in my life. I was very surprised actually. So took a picture of it, and you know, made a fighting stance there. Made a joke of it. You know, you should have seen the other guy. And from there on, it just went downhill. I decided to stay home, booked an appointment with my doctor. My doctor said, okay, you gotta rest. I stayed home for a week, rested, and all of a sudden, pain started to get progressively worse. I had light sensitivity, noise sensitivity, I was irritated, I got nauseous, all the things that we just heard, that's what happened to me. And it didn't want to go away. So I got myself on short-term disability. As I was on short-term disability, I was allowed to rest for a month, and after a month, my insurance company tried to push me, well, yeah, okay, go and work 3 hours a day. How about 4 hours? And they keep pushing and they keep pushing, and eventually say, okay, fine, you know. And the pushing went on until eventually they got me to work for a full day. And my second day working full day, they fired me. So, you know, that's a little bit of my story. The symptoms did not go away. My history is that I've had many concussions in my history. Unfortunately, I was a very active kid, and you know, falling and accidents is just part of the territory that came with it. So I'm also not a person to just sit down and do nothing. So I try to stay active. I practice karate, but I realized I can't do the things that I used to do anymore. I couldn't watch TV anymore. I couldn't listen to the radio anymore. I couldn't listen to loud noise anymore. I can't scroll on my device. It bothers me when my wife is doing Facebook, when I'm sitting on the couch, you know, because of the scrolling and stuff like that. So I started to really slow down, and I started to give myself permission to just be where I was at, because I had a lot of responsibilities, and I was always on top of my game. I mean, I handled finances, I handled 5 to 7 projects in my career, any given time. And on top of that, I also wanted to put the kids to bed, and you know, the list goes on, and I couldn't do it anymore. I just simply couldn't do it anymore. And so I started to actually take pleasure in simple things. And one of the simple things that I took pleasure in was I got to see the prices right. I never saw the prices right because I had to work in a career that was, you know, was busy. So, and I started to, you know, just be happy for the people that were happy, you know, and it's in a funny way that helped me. Started to take the dog out for a nature walk. That helped me significantly. So, but it wasn't enough to get me over the hump. And, you know, one of the things I realized was that very early on is that stress is a major problem in my life. I mean, we were helping my elderly mother-in-law, and helping my elderly folks that live in Europe, and we were helping other people, and then there's the daily stresses of raising kids. You know, young kids still. So I eat a healthy diet. I have a piece of salmon every morning with blueberries and raspberries and red pepper and stuff like that. I don't think it can get any healthier than that. And I try to stay away from cheesies, which I love, but I realized that that actually bothers my brain, so I don't do that anymore. You know, and I even try to reduce my my love for coffee. I mean, I like coffee, but you know, it's gonna mess me up. I mean, you know, it's just not helpful. I still drink coffee. It's just much reduced. So I started to notice improvement. I'm a person that has always kind of listened to his body. I just naturally do. So, and part of the reason is that I've had surgery on my ears, so I always had to be very much aware of when there was a crystal on my nerve or something, because all of a sudden I'd just be feeling very off. And it's just because it was a crystal in my ear that's just, you know, making me dizzy or not making me feel very well. So I started to very much listen to my body, and here's when things improved. First of all, things improved when I simply accepted where I was at, you know, gave myself to just the grace to be where I was at, instead of trying to add to the stress, you know, of trying to push myself to do something when everything in my body says, you know, quit it. So, and I reduced my computer time and device time to no more than 2 hours tops. That was a difficult one, because I'm a programmer, analyst, project manager, I'm in technology. My kids, my wife, everybody around me, my mother-in-law, they will all come to me for computer problems, and I need to solve it. The other thing that I did was, oh, this one's important. I didn't hide or pretend that I was okay when I was not. Okay, I had to communicate to people that I love around me that I'm not okay, and I'm sorry I can't do it. And sometimes that meant that I got emotional, sad, and whatever, because at one point in time, I could do all these things, and it's very bothersome. So, and then I wrote down 2 or 3 things that I wanted to accomplish in any given day. Now, for me, that's pretty easy because that's how I program. When I do programming, I'm very logical in how I'm going to tackle projects, so I started to simply do that, implement that in my life. 2 or 3. I don't want to do 5 or 6 because I know I'm not going to be able to make it. But 2 or 3, you know what? I might just be able to make it. And darn it all, many times I wouldn't make it. But I didn't judge myself if I couldn't accomplish even one of them. No, it used to in the beginning, but you know, I mean, I had to quit that. So I stopped judging myself when I couldn't accomplish something. And if I needed to go back to bed, go back to bed. Not judge myself for that. I got rid of my alarm clock, by the way, because if I have an alarm clock on, because I have to wake up at 8 o'clock, well, guess what? I'm worrying for 4 hours, you know, that I have to wake up at 8 o'clock. Whereas if I do away with the alarm clock, believe it or not, I actually wake up at, you know, 15 minutes before 8 o'clock, and it works just fine. So I go for a simple walk as well in nature, and I did that a few times a week. These things were initial things that I did. I was referred to a neurosurgeon, spinal surgeon by my neurologist, because nobody really knew what to do, where to go. And this person, by that time I'd done an MRI, I had done an X-ray, and nothing showed anything. Hey, I'm just normal, right? I mean, I look normal. And the first thing that he said when I walked in, this is many months later, is, are you willing to do a SPECT scan? I don't even know what SPECT scan was. So, yeah, sure, yeah, no problem. So they booked a SPECT scan for me, and they didn't do the SPECT scan until 11 and a half months after I've had my concussion. And guess what? I was lit up like a Christmas tree. I got perfusions here, I got perfusions there, perfusions in the back of my head as well. I thought, okay, well, that makes sense. And basically what it meant was that there was reduced blood flow to the cellular level, you know? So, and one of the things that he actually suggested to me is on how to get well. He saw that I'd done a lot of things already. He said, well, you know, add to that mindfulness. So mindfulness means that if I'm stressed or upset, well, I go downstairs in my basement where it's really dark. I'm going to lay down, actually, and I'm going to just focus on my breath. I'm going to try to do what we just did now, where we're just trying to not reduce my breath, just calm myself by focusing on my breath. And wherever I'm tense, usually with me, that was the base of my skull. My base of my skull would just be absolute pain, and then all along the side here. And instead of getting stressed about it, because yeah, it's painful, I would just focus on my breathing and just imagine that I would send my breath there. So it didn't work right away, but eventually it started to work. got that pretty handy at it. So, and of course, if people around me upset me as well, I was like, I might as well go downstairs and focus on my breath. So, and I knew instinctively that mindfulness was one of the things that yoga taught. So now I did some stretching in the past, as suggested by a yoga master when I had sciatica and all kinds of other stuff. But I've never done it in class. So I thought, I would look around a little bit. And I was actually a bit nervous about doing a class because I didn't know what kind of people to expect in a yoga class. Really, I've never done that before. So I looked around and I saw they had a great deal at Studio 2. And it was a 2-week deal actually. I thought, 2 weeks, I'll give it 2 weeks and see what it's like. So I went there and I was delighted to see that, hey, there's normal people that go to yoga. I actually felt at home, it was great. So, and it wasn't young people, it was elderly people. And they were in better shape than me even. They could do a downward dog. And I do karate, I couldn't do a downward dog even. And so I felt pretty good about it actually. I liked the space. It was a nice, beautiful wooden floor. I liked the decor, the way it was. Somehow it was very calming to me. And I started to basically regularly come because, well, I wanted to get my money's worth first of all for the 2 weeks. Let's be honest, right? So if I'm going to do 2 weeks for $12 at the time, it's like, okay, well, I might as well make it worthwhile. So I went every single morning and evening if I could, and as soon as I got there, I had to calm down because one of the first things they have you do is they have you lay on the floor. So I had just gotten out of bed and stuff like that. Here I'm laying on the floor, listening to some very soothing music, and everybody else was laying on the floor, so who cares? And I closed my eyes and practiced listening to my breath. And the people are very nice. They really are. And the yoga teachers, I couldn't meet any kind of people than the yoga teachers that are there, and you said me as well. So I felt quite good and relaxed. And guess what? I had done this for 3 times now. I have been walking with severe shoulder pain, neck pain, and the base of my head would constantly be in pain as well. And I couldn't get rid of it through my activity. I couldn't get rid of it through karate. I couldn't get rid of it with walking. I couldn't get rid of it with Tylenol or anything. A heating pad, I tried a heating pad, it didn't work. So, and here I go to yoga, and I think, third or fourth class, the neck and the shoulder pain, it was gone. First class, I had no headache. Very first class. I mean, normally I would have a band around my head, vision, with the light sensitivity and the noise sensitivity, that was reduced. And unbeknownst to me, my irritation disappeared. And I was like, you don't think of these because after, but all of a sudden you realize, hey, you know what? I'm handling some of this stuff pretty good. I'm not as